was hoping other senators are going to show up, but I guess they don't want. That's okay. We'll make this quick for Dr. Christ. Nobody else here. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing convenes this budget roundtable hearing. Budget roundtable hearing notices were given to the media on Monday, April 22nd, and then April 29th, and today is May 2nd, and the time is now 9:02. The committee will hear and accept testimony, both oral and written, on the following, which is the budget. I'd like to acknowledge the Oversight Chair of University of Guam, is Senator Amanda Shelton, also Senator Tello Taitigui. The general rules for the public hearing, the conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying, we recognize the order of signing. This being a round table, we will start with, and if you want, Dr. Christ, we can start with your chairman, and then if he needs to go, I know that he'll be happy to leave, and then he'll be praying that you do great on the remaining of the hearing. Written testimonies may be read. Lengthy written testimonies should be summarized to about 5 minutes, but we would waive that. There would be no requirement for only 5 minutes. Okay? Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. We'll keep all the testimonies to relation to your budget. Folks will be allowed to test. You'll be allowed. The normal general rules will be persons will be allowed to present oral testimony only once, but we have the budget staff. You'll be allowed to continue testifying throughout the hearing. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room. For the proceedings, individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and may be asked to leave or be escorted, removed from the room. Fair warning, if there's any violation of proper decorum, you won't be asked, you will be removed from the hearing. Okay, we want to maintain some order. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on, that you speak into the microphone, and please state your name. Dr. Christ, my understanding is that you have some slides you want to present to start off, but maybe we'll ask the chairman if did you want to give any comments to start off? All right, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Dr. Christ, if you want to start with your slides, we will have no problem with that one.
Maybe I should start with introductions of who all's on our
yes,
side.
Please.
So in addition to Chairman Chris Felix, we also have Regent Jerry Philish, who's Treasurer and head of the Budget Committee. To my left, then we have Randy Wiegand, the Vice President for Administration and Finance. To my right, we have the Senior Vice President, Dr. Anita Enriquez. And then we have Mark Duarte, who's Director of Financial Aid. And we also have a number of people in the audience ready to pop up with any questions that you might have, to answer any questions you might have. So, Sitsuits Masi and Buenas San Hafide. So glad to be here and glad to have this opportunity to talk more about the finances of the University of Guam and our budget request. So the first slide we have is the fiscal year 2020 appropriations request. So you'll see there that we're requesting $33.95 million in general operations, $4.05 million in student financial aid assistance program, and $570,000 for special appropriations, including the Water and Environmental Research Institute, the hatchery, and other things in that category. As we stated at the first budget hearing, the statement of the problem for us has been until about 2015, UOG had been growing, and we showed some charts about that steady growth. So more graduates, more community services, and attracting more research grants. Through the program called Good to Great under my predecessor, Dr. Robert Underwood, UOG became more efficient. So we cut programs, we made sure that the programs we have are functioning as efficiently as possible. We really did some of the work to become a more effective institution and really, poised for greatness. Then between fiscal years 2016 to 2019, the Department of Administration's cuts forced UOG to defer programs, defer capital projects and maintenance, defer hiring, and to cut budgets for units. And the fiscal year 2019 appropriation cut did even more damage beyond that, and that was followed by even more and deeper DOA cuts. So this is the statement of the problem that we presented and want to emphasize today as well. Now, this next slide is talking a little bit about the cost of education, and higher education finance is really complicated even for those of us on the inside. And so there's a difference between the direct cost of instruction versus the total cost of UOG's operation. And so the total cost includes things like direct services, and most people I think are aware of services like CEDARS and WERI and the Center for Island Sustainability, where they're typically getting grants and providing direct service to the people of Guam. And then another element is research grants are another element in the total cost. But for direct cost of instruction, which I think is sort of a matter that we're considering today, this includes faculty compensation, facilities, maintenance, and auxiliary services, things that are directly related to educating students. And this next slide shows the increasing costs of direct instruction for UOGs. You see the figures there in green rising to $15,126 per student. That's the cost for direct instruction of students. And then you see the tuition figure there has held steady since 2015. So that sort of helps to present the problem visually. This next slide we presented at the first budget hearing, and it just shows you what's happened since 2015. So for most of those years, we've had considerable support from the legislature in the appropriation process, and then you see the severe drop in the allotments from the Department of Administration. And with the 2018 and 2019 cuts in the appropriation, you see that that trend is just accelerated by the drop in appropriation as well. As you know, the University of Guam also manages the Student Financial Assistance Program. So the next slide shows the drop in that as well. So you see the rise there. The yellow box for the collections is the repayment of loans for people who don't stay in Guam. So if you stay in Guam, then the financial assistance is a grant that you don't need to repay. If you don't stay in Guam, then you need to repay that amount. So that repayment adds money into our coffers that we're able to give out to other students with financial need. So that's why that shows there. But even with that, with the collections, you see the decline there. And the decline in financial assistance has an effect on our enrollment and on our completion rates, which are really important to all of Guam to get students in and through and graduated and into their careers. The next slide shows the recent growth at the university with enrollment and credit hours. You see the investment made by the legislature and the government in general over these years has led directly to enrollment improvements. And you see that kind of plateauing as a result there on the right side. And that has a direct relationship to the decline in resources from GovGuam. And we emphasize this too at the budget hearing, this next one about our affordability. So compared to other public universities in the states and territories, we're a very affordable institution. It's important for us to stay affordable. 47% of our students are recipients of the Pell Grant, which is a federal grant that's given to students with financial need. And so it's very important for our ability to do the great work we do for Guam to remain affordable. And this brings us, of course, to the topic of tuition increases. So raising tuition is probably inevitable in this environment with the decline in support over a period of years. But whenever you do it, it invariably has a negative impact on enrollment, retention of students one year to the next, and also to graduation rates. So direct relationship. And the Student Financial Aid Program, the SFAP, The reduction in that is exacerbating our situation wherein programs are being reduced or eliminated that students rely on to graduate. So one of the coping mechanisms when we don't get any money from DOA or the appropriations go down is to slow down the operation. Don't offer courses, don't hire people for vacancies and so on, and that makes it harder to keep students and to graduate them. The next slide on appropriation cuts versus tuition increases, this sort of gives an idea of what, the levers that remain to us. So the University of Guam's request there is for $33.95 million. The governor's recommendation was significantly below that at $25.91 million. That difference is $8.04 million, or a 23.7% reduction from our request. And then what follows is what the increase in tuition would yield. So you can sort of figure out the level of tuition increase necessary to make up for the shortfall. And then this next slide is on other ways for UOG to cope with this financial situation. One is developing public-private partnerships, and I think the panel's aware of the shrimp and tilapia aquaculture, the hatchery project. Might also be aware of our effort to get a private partner to help build a 300-bed international dorm. So these are operations that can generate more revenue, that can take the place of other revenue that we've lost. There's also auxiliary services, including food and conference hosting, renting facilities out to non-university organizations. And then also attracting more off-island students for both degree programs and short courses. So we're in the process of pursuing all of these things, but they all sort of depend on the basic support from the GovGuam for our basic operations so that we can do those things that will help us to become more independent. So steady GovGuam support is the key to excellence. Developing these new ways for UOG to cope requires steady GovGuam support. UOG has proven it is capable of great things, of efficient operation, high quality, in-demand programs, economic innovation, and culture and language vitalization. Achieving greatness and also less dependence on GovGuam is impossible if UOG is forced to continue in crisis management mode, which the last several years of cuts have forced the university to do. So that concludes the sort of a refresher from the presentation that we gave at the budget hearing with a few extra slides and images trying to get around to helping us all understand the complexity of the university, but happy to have questions and conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Kreis. I'd like to also recognize Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano and Senator Will Castro, and just let everybody know that I think all of us, there's 4 of us out of the 5 that are graduates of University of Guam, and we're trying to get Senator Taylor to go back and finish and get her graduates passed. So
it's never too late.
She was a student there, so there's nothing wrong with that. She's got a shot of going back. She just have to maybe change her, her. Give her honorary degree. There. Okay, we'll work with Dr. Kreis on that one. But, I would first start out with the oversight chair to ask her questions. I have a list of questions, but I'll have the oversight chair first ask questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Kreis, for the refresher. And when we were here last time, I think we talked a little bit about the allotment schedule that you were receiving. And of course, we heard from the governor that she was committed to ensuring that our higher learning institutions received their allotment schedule. So I'm looking at the second quarter 2019 drawdown request that was for $13 million. And you only received $9 million. So I'm wondering, has this been sufficient for your operations, or are you suffering from this still? Randy?
We're suffering.
Just say.
Randy Wiegand, Vice President, Admin and Finance. I think the quick answer is we're suffering. It's been very hard. And compounding things, in prior years we've had the expectation that if we don't get all our funds as of 9/30, that we will still get funds going on, but that stopped last year, and now we're looking at our cash allotments are still projecting our general operations money is going to be $5 million short, and we feel like with the cuts, the appropriation cuts, we just can't bear with having cash allotment withholding on top of that.
Okay, thank you. So also in your most recent statement of revenue and expenses, you show that your investment income is a net negative of $434,000. So I just want to know how an investment income can be a negative.
Well, the investment, we've actually back in the early 90s, we have put our investments in a managed portfolio, and it's done like 400% over time. But it does fluctuate, and there's a lot of money that's, it's primarily our land grant funds, where we were given $3 million in 1974, and it has been invested since then, and it's grown now to a total of about 14 million. And but that money is invested in stocks, bonds, and other alternative investments. So it does fluctuate, and March and April have been good months, and now we're back up toward our all-time highs on our investments.
Okay, good to hear. Also, in the last hearing, I asked about the scholarship funds and the phasing out of certain programs like the ProTech scholarship, right? And it's not due to a lack of demand. So I was wondering if we can just get a little more information about the phasing out of those programs, because I know that right now we're looking for more professional and technical expertise on Guam in a whole lot of different areas, and I'm not sure if this is the smartest move for us to do, to phase out these ProTech scholarships that will help us to get those expertise on island.
Good morning, Mark Duarte. Actually, no programs have been phased out. So the ProTech is still on the books, and we do every academic year we do have an application cycle. It's just that the number of applicants and the number of awardees have gone down since the funding has gone down, but the program is still in effect. And over the years, we've done the priority listing. It's been the medical field, it's on there, all the fields that are needed, considered high needs on Guam. And that list is renewed every 3 years. But the program is still in effect. In fact, coming this July is our next application cycle.
Okay, and how many students avail of this program right now?
Maybe about 6-7 years ago, we had the highest application acceptance rate, and that was about 55 students. And that is at $20,000 per year for the person. And if they're going to medical school, that was $35,000 a year. So it was pretty substantial at the time. We're down now to there's about 14 active, and then we accept maybe 3 to 4 every year based on our funding.
Okay, and last, you said that there aren't really students applying, so like in the last cycle, how many applicants did you see?
We do have applicants applying, it's just the accepted applicants. So we have, for the last year, we had 22 applications. Now we based it on priority, so some of them are doing things like a master's in administration, education administration, which is not considered high needs. So those are placed in lower priority. But we always place priority on those who are going to medical field, engineering, those are on top. And of course, with the application, we also look at financial need based on their FAFSA, and that plays into the formula of who gets accepted into the program.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Okay, I just have one more question, and this is about how much what is your budget for the ESA Psychological Center? This is a conversation that we've been having, and after attending the sexual assault forum on campus last week, this is something that's been in my mind, and I don't see anything in the budget specifically for ESA Psychological Center. I want to know if this is folded into your psychology department or where I can find that. Because I know that other institutions do have different kinds of professional counselors who work in these areas, and I want to ensure that we're going to fund that particular center.
So maybe I can invite Dean James Selman of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences to remark on the ESA program.
Yes, this is problematic.
Come forward, ma'am.
Everything is recorded, so make sure you turn on your mic.
Yes, the light's
you.
on. Yes, this is problematic. The budget cut has put pressure on the college. The ESA Psychological Services Center is totally funded on NAF, and the cut has now got me down to 2 hours to keep the clinic open in the summer.
2 hours a day, 2 hours a week?
2 hours a day.
Okay.
So that was the best I could come up with. I was thinking I was going to have to totally close it for the summer. It's VAWAP also, the Violence Against Women Prevention Services. I think we're trying to get a sub-grant out of the governor's office. He's got a federal grant for violence against women prevention. So we're trying to get a sub-grant out of that to help fund VAWAP. VAWAP is the first place that the victims would go to.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Dean Selman. And yes, Dr. Enriquez?
Thank you, Senator. We do have, we've institutionalized a behavioral counselor for the purpose of ensuring that we have full coverage to support our sexual misconduct policy that was revamped a few years ago. And so that particular licensed individual is housed within our Enrollment Management and Student Success Division. That is a full-time position and certainly a supplement to our counseling department.
Okay, so they can be accessed at any time, not just
anytime,
the 2 hours
yes,
a week.
that's
Okay.
the primary purpose of that position.
Where are they again?
Housed at our student center with our counselors under the Division of Enrollment Management and Student Success.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I'd ask Senator Tello, do you have questions you want to ask?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, UOG, for being here. And yes, I'm sorry I didn't graduate from UOG, but doesn't mean I don't love you guys. Of course I love you. I'm waiting for Chris Felix to give me an honorary degree. Okay. You know, I was reviewing the budget last night, and from what the governor presented to us in her executive budget, and I'm showing that based on yours, the governor recommendation of 25.91 million, a university requesting 33.95. However, I'm looking over here at the budget, I'm seeing 31 million on her executive budget was 31 million. And then as I'm moving over to other places within her budget, it's showing she's giving you in appropriations through special funds, close to 4 million, 1.661. So there's a different discrepancy in here.
Yeah, just to, we try to keep things apples to apples, and so we generally talk about what we're getting for our general operations account. And so that's the amount that at one point we were getting 30 million, and then we were getting 27, and now this year we're getting 25. So all the other appropriations have stayed pretty level, but the general operations, which affects our everyday operations, is the one that's been shrinking.
However, you do realize it's 31 million, not 25 here, right?
It's 31 if you include what we get for federal matching grants.
Which is 5 million, 5.1 million in matching funds, correct? And then, so you're taking the 25 from the general fund and then matching, I see. You're taking the general fund funding, but if you incorporate everything based on all the other appropriations, you're looking at a lot more than that. You're looking at an additional 4 million.
Well, if we could look at our total grant over time, and that would show the same thing, because
Okay.
all the other funds have been pretty steady.
Okay.
And so it would still show the downtrend, that we're down about 2 million of what we got last year.
And could I add that that's in the category where I was talking about the difference between direct cost of instruction versus the total cost. So the
Operating.
matching funds for grants, any sort of
Sure.
direct service grant, those are all really great things that UOG does. It just doesn't go toward the instructions. That's our issue, is the support, and it's the basic appropriation is the main issue here. So.
Okay, I'll probably during a budget hearing, we'll fine-tooth comb that one as well. And the other question you mentioned, or the answer you gave, was to Senator Shelton with regards to some funding. You invest certain money from the University of Guam. So you receive that money from where, and then you invest into stocks and bonds. So the question is, when you do these investments, do you yield out some funding and utilize that for the University of Guam? I mean, you don't just let that money keep writing and writing for years and years without pulling any of that out. How much money have you raised so far through stocks and bonds?
So Senator, there are two sort of basic categories. One is the land grant endowment that the university holds and manages inside the university. Then there's the UOG Endowment Foundation, which is a separate 501c3 that manages the donations to the university. So I'll start with the Endowment Foundation. So the vast majority of the money that they hold, it's about 13 million, is in designated funds. So if you give $500,000 to the Endowment Foundation for scholarships, then about 5% of that will be spun off every year and be directed to support scholarships. So there'll be the funds are all very specifically supporting different kinds of activities. It's rare for any endowment money to be usable in a general kind of operating budget kind of thing. That's true even at private universities. So all the money is very specifically designated to do special things. And then for the endowment that the university holds, there was some withdrawal from that fund in a way that wasn't a good idea. Did I put that right? About 20 years ago. And so there's been an effort by the board designating that we must restore the amount of that endowment, the land grant endowment, to where it would have been had that money not been improperly withdrawn. And so we're close to reaching that point. But even once we reach it, it's the amount of that is relatively small. You can usually expect about 5% of any endowment is what is produced for other operations.
Do you have an audit report of that here in your budget request?
We can provide our audit.
Yes, I'd like to see that. Yeah, okay. With regards to that funding, okay, and how it's utilized and spent and how much grows into the account, et cetera, down the line. So I guess if it's never been provided, then I think at least in the last 10 years,
Sure.
or if there's some huge discrepancy further back, then I'd like to have that,
Of
too,
course,
if you
yes,
don't mind.
happy to.
Could I add just one? It's about to be released, yeah.
Okay, appreciate that.
So we talked about the land grant, and for most universities, I think there's 50 land grant universities in the country. And for most of them, the federal government went in and gave a plot of land to be used, and so they were called land grant.
Right.
UOG already had prime land at the time that we became a land grant university, and so they gave us cash in lieu of that. But they said that the initial $3 million they're giving us cannot be spent, and so the board had taken measures to protect the corpus, make sure that the corpus can grow over time. But because it's simulating land, it's not something that we feel is appropriate to to use that money for ongoing operational expenses. So.
How about capital improvements? I mean, it's obvious, land hand in hand, you're improving on the property, and so this.
Well,
have
actually,
you used
we're
it?
restricted from, they've got restrictions on, construction's restricted, and so capital improvements may be a part of that also. So there are restrictions on what we can do with the funds.
I'd like that too as well,
Sure.
especially that, what you can and cannot spend. The other one I have is, are you familiar with the Cancer Fund Trust, the Guam Cancer Trust Fund? Okay. How much is in there right now currently? It's close to $5 million. $5 million? It's a lot of money, especially when so many people with cancer hasn't been distributed. How much of that is used for administrative cost?
It's about 10% of the annual expenditures is an administrative allowance we take.
How much did you receive last year in the FY19 budget for the cancer?
FY19, we had 0.
Okay.
FY18, we had 2.7.
2.7. And then, if I'm not mistaken, FY19, there was a restriction on administrative costs to be utilized. I believe if you look at the FY budget that was passed, there was a restriction to 5% for administrative costs. Can you look into that,
Sure,
please?
sure.
Make sure you're on. You're required a quarterly report
We
for
do
the
that.
cancer. Okay, I'd like to have that report if I may. Okay. And also, some of the costs that some of the people you awarded for the Cancer Trust Fund are places like American Cancer Society, the Edward Calvo Foundation, and one of them was the University of Guam for $47,250 to the University of Guam Professional International Program. What is that?
Anybody else want to take that, or do you want? I can take it. The professional and international programs is it's a unit that we have in the university that serves alternative teaching methods. So there's a big English as a second language program under PIP, under the professional international programs, and so what they do is they use some of those funds to go out and do cancer training, cancer prevention classes, and things like that can help educate the community to the problem of cancer.
Who oversees that? Who oversees it? Is it somebody in the field of medical, or at least counselor for cancer, anything like that?
No, that's just a small part of what they do. And so, Carlos Titano is kind of a general business person, and it's really just coordinating he doesn't do the training himself. He hires people to come in and do the training. So it's just an administrative role that he has.
And does he ever follow up with all these awards that are given out to see if they're really doing what the award grant was, the application was put forth for?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Like, for instance, when awards are given out through the Guam Cancer Trust Fund to like American Cancer Society or the Calvo's Foundation, that you get a report from them on how the money is spent.
We do get
Okay,
reports
good.
at the end of each year.
I'm glad
And
to hear
just to
that.
clarify, Carlos just is PIP, which they just got a small portion to do some outreach and training.
Okay.
Our Office of Research and Sponsored Programs oversees the Guam Cancer Trust Fund.
Okay, so, yeah, I'd like to see the report on that because, there were some issues last year with regards to this account, and just having that much money in there, and there's so many people out there that could utilize this funding who have cancer, I'm just surprised it's still there. Okay. Actually, that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Tello, for addressing the cancer part, because a lot of them will need funds to get off island to go to get treatment, but let the cancer folks figure that one out. Okay, Senator Kelly Marsh, Titano.
Manana Sidus, everybody. So to better understand some of what you have presented, in looking at the slide where it looks at increasing costs of UOG, it looks like this is cost of attendance per student per semester?
Per year.
Per year. Okay. I paid my son's tuition, so I was thinking maybe that was per semester, given that he graduated a little while ago. Okay, so that's very helpful to understand. And then when we get to the slide that talks about appropriation cuts versus tuition increase, when the calculation for the tuition increase was done, did that take into account the potential negative impact? So was that part of the calculation, or was it just a straight calculation of the increase?
Just a straight calculation of increase. There would probably be a dampening effect on enrollment, which we find every time we raise tuition, there's a dampening effect. So that's true, there would be a little bit lower, yeah.
Okay. And I'm wondering also the impact on our regional students, many of whom, if I'm remembering correctly, are Pell Grant awardees and are going to the university on those. Would that tuition increase, do you see that having any impact on our students from Palau and the Marshall Islands and islands like that?
It certainly would. It's a good thing that our tuition is lower than the maximum Pell Grant, because students can use the difference for books and living expenses and so on. For our students from FSM, Marshall Islands, Palau, they sometimes get supplemental scholarship money from their governments to cover living expenses and travel and so on. So the Pell Grant is really important for our regional mission for getting students from those places, and so I'm anxious about keeping the Pell Grant for that population.
Right, we're such an important regional hub.
Yes, I agree.
Right, important to the development of the entire region. So if there is, let's say we look at the 20% tuition increase, or any of the others, do you think that would challenge, like go above the threshold of the Pell Grant and the supplemental grants they're getting from their government?
Certainly. So even, let's see, I think even 10%, about 10% would get us to the threshold. So we're trying hard, and the institution for years has been trying to keep the tuition low, and so we're one of the lowest tuitions of any public university in the country. So that's a great achievement, but there's a cost to that. So we're not interested in doing any of these things. So, yeah.
Well, if in the event some of this does have to be implemented, if you could refresh my memory or let me know otherwise, do we have, I think we have some relationships with like the colleges that are out in our region, the Palau Community College and so forth. Do we have a sister university college relationship that would allow them to have pay in-state tuition? Is that how that works?
Yes, that's in place now. So we offer in-state tuition rates for everybody in the region. So.
Okay. That was my recollection, but I just wanted to make sure and have that clear. So with the ways for UOG to cope, these are very important, of course. So it's good to see so much work. I was here in your earlier public hearing, and you had quite a lengthy list. There was quite a lot of work that you all are doing to create revenue generation, to retain students, to increase the number of students, all sorts of programs, so that's commendable. Do you at least roughly have some timelines for when these endeavors would become revenue generating?
Yeah, our problem is that most of them are a few years away from actually being. That's why we can adjust, but we need some time to adjust to these. So the hatchery, it looks like we might be able to get something within a few years. And then actually, it's looking like it may be 10 years before we can get a little bit more significant amount. But it isn't going to be a big amount that we get, but we're pursuing the idea that a lot of small sources of revenue are going to help us.
Okay, and that ties in with a follow-up question I had of potential yields. For the 300-bed international dorm, is that going to be in addition to the current dorms?
Yes.
Okay, and I've been to those dorms over the decades, many a time, but I don't have an understanding of how many dorm rooms there are presently.
Yeah, it moves a little bit because we use some for other purposes, but generally we have about 150 beds that we have in those buildings.
Okay, so that would increase it to potentially about 450. And that, I presume, would also take a few years to construct and get into running shape. And what is the potential difference that you are looking at that yielding for the university? Or is that something that kind of washes out with the...
No, I mean, the intent, we won't do the project unless there's going to be a positive cash flow from it. At one point, when we were running our numbers, it looked like we could clear close to $1 million a year from that project. And again, most of the student use of that building would be from the professional and international programs using their English as a second language programs. Currently, they bring people to the island, and they have, like, some are 2-day, 3-day, some are 1-week programs, 2-week programs, 3-week programs, and we have to house them someplace on the island, and then we have to bus them to Guam, to the university, and we think we could save money all the way around, give them better accommodations if we could build that on campus, and we could still have some additional money to be additional revenue for the university. We won't know for sure until we go out and get quotes, and we'll have to run the numbers at that point. And if it doesn't look like it's going to work out for us, then we won't do the project.
Randy, Dr. Kreis, when the dorm was first built, how many rooms were there? How many dorms?
So the maximum capacity is 210 for our current structure. The current occupancy is 170 because there's been a gradual renovation of rooms.
Okay,
So,
and you identified that some of the rooms were used for what?
Well, part of it is given to the ROTC, so they operate one wing of one dorm. We have our EEO office in there. We've had safety in there, so we have a couple other uses of some of the rooms.
This is over right by the field house, right? We're not talking about the staff housing where the ROTC used to be and where everybody else was. So you move them out of there and you move them into the dorm.
some, yeah.
Are they making any payments for that, the ROTC? They're all federal people, so I'm just curious.
It's a benefit to the program, to the university. They give a lot of scholarship money to their people to attend the university.
And it's a requirement for hosting a ROTC detachment that the university provide the facility.
Okay, I just wanted to, thank you.
That addresses largely the questions that I had. I do see that there is an increase of food services that are available on campus, sort of akin to food trucks. It's worked with that movement, but I'm sure that revenue generation is pretty small. What about the timeline for attracting more off-island students? Is there a timeline of expected outcome from that?
So yes, Senator, I'll have Dr. Enriquez elaborate, but we have had students from UCLA, 24 last summer, and others are in the works.
Yes, we've basically strengthened our relationship with our two-year regional sister colleges in FSM, Palau, RMI, CNMI, and next week we will be signing an agreement to offer a 3+1 criminal justice degree, where 3 years worth of credits are actually offered in Saipan, and the fourth year is filled by through University of Guam courses. We plan to replicate that model with the Palau Community College and certainly any other high-demand programs that these colleges don't already have. So that will open the gate to even more students coming as transfer students to the University of Guam, hence the need to ensure that we manage properly the availability of the dorm rooms. Just recently, I took a small delegation to the Chamorro Cultural Festival hosted by the Chetlu organization at the San Marcos campus in San Diego. And the theme was Maila Tati, Study Abroad at the University of Guam, with the intention of targeting 3 subgroups. Those who are currently university and college students in the States, who represent the Guam and CNMI diaspora, and who may be interested in a study abroad experience at UOG. Secondly, those students who are graduating from high school who may want to come back to the homeland to study and avail of some of our signature programs, such as Chamorro Studies or other, the other 25 plus that we have under our baccalaureate portfolio, and also the Rhodes Scholars. These elder hostel, these more mature types of professionals who are looking for an experience, whether they be studying Pacific Coral or perhaps wanting to learn more about Litichen or perhaps wanting to know more about war in the Pacific, utilizing the knowledge experts that we have across our centers for excellence, including the Micronesian Area Research Center, and having both a classroom and field experience. We can run those through our professional international programs. In addition to that, also diversifying into capitalizing on the existing veterans market, the military market. The Army National Guard has talked about having their training center available to host courses on site. We've already signed, agreement with some of our high schools to offer our college-level courses on site, sort of an after-school kind of arrangement, and so we develop somewhat of a forecast. So hopefully we'll start to see the fruit of that investment in recruitment with a lot of exciting folks actually reaching out throughout the immediate region and also throughout our diaspora located in the continental U.S.
So Jus Ma'asi, a lot of that sounds very exciting. I'm very pleased especially to hear about the study abroad at UOG program. I think that is going to contribute to our community in a really long-term fashion, that it will strengthen that connection and possibly bring people back or have them look for opportunities, ways that they're going to be continuing to contribute to our community that way. I'd also like to know, has there been outreach in the international, like our regional Southeast Asian or other Pacific Island program? And do we have any partnerships in place with the University of the South Pacific or any other universities within our region?
Thank you, Senator. I was just visiting the University of the South Pacific campuses in Fiji and Samoa and talking about the possibility of exchanges and perhaps collaborative research ventures or other kinds of things. It's structurally the difference between the Commonwealth Pacific and the American-oriented Pacific and the EU Pacific. There's an issue about how we translate across those lines, but there's interest in USP and other universities in those countries. So yes, we also had a really successful Center for Island Sustainability conference, and we had 8 university presidents together, all talking about ways that we might exchange students students or faculty or otherwise collaborate on projects. So we have some efforts among the research heads talking to each other, the workforce development heads talking to each other to see about ways that we can do more. But I think there's great potential for doing that. But yeah, so.
Gov Malik, or very good. And part of what I've really liked, it probably exists at UOG as well, but I know that I've studied out of the University of the South Pacific and some of the others. Even in Australia, they have really important programs in Australia to learn how to accommodate and bring in the Aboriginal population. And then for the University of the South Pacific, they've really worked at tailoring programs so that they deal with some of the Pacific community issues, such as for their medical program. They revamped it in such a way that everybody who left that program, whether it be that they had been there for 6 months or longer, they left with some sort of certification. They changed it from the typical Western model where after 6 months, if you were feeling homesick or you went home for whatever reason, you didn't have anything that helped out the community, but they really brought in that alternative way of thinking about serving our community, which I know UOG does as well. So working with partners like that, I think has real potential budget-wise, but also in serving our community in long-term and really meaningful ways. So those are very good to hear about as well. So Sizes Masi for that.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Will.
First of all, thank you for coming back. Chairman, thank you for the follow-up roundtable. Like the previous speakers, I'm also vested as an alum, as a former student regent and former SGA president, and I do have a loved one for the record who's employed with the university, but there is no conflict of interest. But I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, if I don't sincerely and in a very strong way advocate my support for the university, there will be conflict at home. So with that said, I don't want to be the person who sobers the conversation up after hearing such high notes. But I do want to state for the record, because it's important, because I'm speaking from a position of experience, at least in my second term. There are talks, you're going to hear a lot of talk about raises, and you're going to hear talks about the restoration of increments. You're even going to hear a lot of discourse about filling positions throughout the government. And that's fine, and I can support it conceptually. But I do want to bring it to the front of mind that the university economists, to include other subject matter experts, Mr. Chairman, have cautioned us that 2019 looks to be flat, God forbid, even contract. And so my message to the university community, and I don't necessarily want to address this today because I want to go back to some really neat points that were raised for public awareness, but also so that we can flesh this out so I can have something positive to share at the dinner table. But Mr. Chairman, I'd like a follow-up meeting in terms of looking at the university's plans for austerity. This is not our first rodeo. I see a lot of people in the room who have come in through the ranks, both from an administrative assistant level, if you will, or executive assistant, on through being senior administrators, and you're surrounded by experts and people who are truly vested in the community. Dr. Marsh, who's also with the university family, at least now in spirit, referenced a lot of things on Project COPE, this particular slide, and so I commend you, and maybe we can come back to that another time, because these are discussions that the governor highlighted recently, but these are discussions that have been had in prior administrations as well, particularly the development of a superior stock, a shrimp, if you will. And I'm happy to hear that there are questions relative to yield coming from the university, but I'm more interested in seeing what we can do to kind of turn out or spawn out so that other businesses can jump on that opportunity. I've had conversations in Hawaii when I was on the Fisheries Management Council, and everybody at the table, notwithstanding the fact it was a fisheries discussion, can acknowledge the fact that there's a superior brood, if you will, a particular type of shrimp that we have that's disease resistant, and that we could make a lot of money. And so I don't know what the true potential is there, but I'd like to explore that, and less about what the university is going to do to produce this for itself and for us, but more about what you're going to do to get the private sector to react and embrace it. I think the true spirit of entrepreneurship is going to rest with those whose paycheck is derived from its success. And so we can come back to that. Mr. Chairman, again, I would like to have a follow-up discussion. I wouldn't mind driving up there by myself with you, Mr. Chair, whoever's interested, but no microphones and just a nice loose back and forth. I mean, no one be offended if we cut each other off to ask follow-up questions, and just a friendly, amicable discussion. I'd like to talk a little bit more about Research Corporation. I'm very interested in the international dorm, the revenue model that you may have associated with that. Also the CIP, the amount of money needed to raise the building, if you will. I'm also curious about the conference and the facilities rental. I know that was something the university historically has looked at for revenue and struggled with it, and now you have a lot more competition with the DUCIT and other entities that may be coming up. And there are other developments that are coming up on the island. I do want to commend you, your team, for coming up with several programs that sort of build upon one another, right? Somebody referenced the criminal justice program. I was in the CNMI over the weekend, surprise, Mr. Chairman, and I was in conversation with the, I believe his title is Commissioner, Glenn Munya, and we talked about a possible Masters of Education, an almost executive level program where they could come here on occasion, but you can actually rotate between the islands. And I do want to say that one of your senior administrators back there, Mr. Camacho, the Dean of Student Support Services, and forgive me if I'm slaughtering the title, but he's using his contacts in the CNMI to sort of facilitate these types of discussions. And so that's a good segue for me, not just to leave that on the table for you to consider and capitalize upon with Mr. Glenn Munya, the commissioner, who has a cohort very much curious and interested, Mr. Camacho, on working with the university on a master's program. And I would much rather see that they're contributing to the university's coffer than for them to rely upon Framingham. Nothing against Framingham. I think any other institution's a fine institution. But there's no institution better than the one that's in our backyard. And so they acknowledge that. I think that the challenge is going to be putting together a hybrid program for which there's some contact hours, but it's not overwhelming for these persons who are breadwinners or caring for young ones at home in the CNMI. It's a revenue source, granted, not a lot, but it's something. Also like to discuss at another time, maybe work with the Endowment Foundation, get into some of the details, Mr. Chairman, on the investment and the return on investment. I wasn't being an active listener, forgive me. I know it was referenced, but what is the corpus of the endowment now? Anybody have a?
It's about 13 million.
It's about 13, so it's kind of been the same since we were there as students, and so, you know, there's a lot of things I can probably deduce from that, but we can get into that later. One more thing, perhaps it might serve as an opportunity for the university. The Northern Marianas College was devastated as a result of Super Typhoon U2. I don't know how many students have taken the risk, if you will, to come across and enroll at the university in a seemingly in a seamless transition for themselves. But that's something also to look at. I know that GCC was aggressive in working with former NMC President Dr. Fernandez in being that institution that would receive their records should they have lost their accreditation years back, and that was the reason for my going back to assist. But I'd like to see the university pick up if there's an opportunity. They're going to rebuild their campus. They had an opportunity to secure a certain amount of funding for as a result of the Super Typhoon. But again, my point would be, you know, there's definitely a market there, a small one, but a market that we can tap. I do also want to close, Mr. Chairman, with thanking you, President Kreis, for reaching out to the South Pac. I had the privilege of visiting both Fiji and American Samoa. And as you know better than I do, that not the territories, but our international partners are in a much better position to secure international funding and even funding from the United States through a different mechanism. And so looking at that opportunity is something, this is the first time I actually thought about that with you, having you germinated that right here in my mind at least. And so it'd be interesting to see how far we can go to leverage their resources. And I'll close again by thanking the university community for doing so much and bringing new ideas. Dr. Anita, it was awesome. I've actually never heard of these programs, and this is the first time, and the implications are not quantifiable. I'm talking about things like mailet tati as a phrase that she used. I think it has tremendous and significant potential that would help us restore our culture and language, and probably even on a larger level, our identity as a great Chamorro nation, tapping those who've left for decades. That's truly a unique perspective, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate you looking at veterans and what services we can offer, because for folks like my father, who's a Navy veteran, a war veteran, and 3 times retired, I think, he has some money to spare, and so I'd love to see him take a trip up to the university and invest that up there at the campus. And I know Colonel David Okada, a brother in the Santa Teresita parish, would also be instrumental in that regard. He's a consummate planning professional, and I appreciate his contribution to the community in general. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, follow-up discussion with you, Mr. President. If the chairman would choose that I act on my own, I'd like to follow up with you on the Research Corporation, the International Dorm, the Milet Tutti program, Veteran Services program. I'll provide this to Mark Duarte, who's a good friend of mine, who's right across from me, and maybe he could facilitate as well. I know you're very busy, Mr. President. And also the discussions around the shrimp industry that could possibly help us bring in additional revenue. And then I will close with how I started. Please be extremely mindful that should the economy have a downturn, even to the slightest percentage, that I would expect, as the institution of the highest level of formal learning here in the region, that we have plans to prepare us for that, to avoid financial exigency. It was such a painful process for us last spring, for the island and the government of Guam in general. And yes, I was at the university when we also experienced extreme financial exigency, coupled with natural disaster that hit us, and Dr. Nedadog and Dr. Salas and all those presidents before you had to make some tough calls. And so I just want to put that out as a yellow flag to be mindful, because I certainly don't want to come back here in September, October, before the end of the fiscal year, and we're raising hell that we haven't met the revenues anticipated for the entire government of Guam, and that the university is not in a position to react accordingly. This is the same message I'm going to bring to all the line agencies, because it's okay to talk again about increments being restored, about raises, and about filling all the positions you want to fill. But if we don't bring in the revenues as a result of the Tax Cuts Jobs Act, or a contraction in the Asian economy, we've got some serious problems. And so I want to thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the privilege to speak before your committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Will. Well, yes, go for it, Doc.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Senator Castro, for that. The one key thing I'd really like to get across is that the work that the university's done over 10, 20 years has made it something that is worth investing in and can solve problems, and it can help develop new industries. It can even things like we're trying to increase the number of nurses we graduate by 33%, from 30 to 40 a year. We're all spending money on the traveling nurse program, the most expensive nurses on the planet. So if we can invest in the nursing program, we can produce nurses who will then save Guam and GovGuam money. If we're contracting and we can't hire people and we're cutting back on the number of nurses we produce, we'll be spending more on the traveling nurses instead of investing in our own people. Our School of Engineering is working very hard to get the critical accreditation called ABET by 2023. If they're forced to delay because they can't hire people, then we can't be producing our own engineers to help with our own economic development. So it's not just that we could and we know how to contract. And the Good to Great program, everybody figured out how to be much, much more efficient. So your university is really is operating as efficiently as it can be, and the investments that you can make in it will help us all solve all of our problems. And so that's the difference, I think, if compared to, say, to another agency, there's that UOG can help solve the problems, can help develop the industries, and so to think of it as an investment, and that we can't really be this creative, we can't do this many things if we're in crisis mode, and particularly the kind of, we can't anticipate it, it just cut and cut and cut. You know, one week it's this month much, and next week it's, you know, a much smaller amount. That kind of thing makes it really hard to be the kind of problem solvers that we've proven that we can be. And thanks for the comments about Northern Marianas College. So I'll be leaving a fairly sizable delegation of UOG people to NMC next week, and we're signing a new MOU on the criminal justice program. You mentioned what we refer to as low residency programs, where there's, you know, some face-to-face contact, but then there's a hybrid kind of arrangement. So those kinds of programs would be really good for our regional partners as well. Happy to do the second casual roundtable on campus actually at any time. We love to talk about ourselves. And let's see, and also on the veterans program, so I've been very pleased with Dean Lawrence Camacho's effort on recognizing veterans. So this year we've had 2 new events run by student government and by EMSS. We've had the Veterans Day observation. Our 220 student veterans were acknowledged. That was the first time we've done that. And then we also had Tritons Out Loud this last week. So the first ever really diversity-focused kind of a program. So that was EMSS and SGA that made that possible. So 2 really good things along those lines, and I'm very pleased to see the focus on student veterans. And also in teaching, so we have now permission, thanks to Dean Camacho, to teach on the Barragata Readiness Center, and we're working with the 2 bases to restore our teaching there as well. So those are all efforts focused on the military engagement.
Thank you, Dr. Kreis. I was going to ask you about that, about the base, but you answered that. A reminder on the areas of ways for UOG to cope. We have the Bill 76-35, the hatchery. Hopefully we'll get that resolved, and hopefully we can see some funding. That's on the hatchery. That's the UOG property that somebody took a little bit of that should have just belonged to UOG. I have several questions, but they're very simple. First one actually is in reference to the first generation trust fund. Where are we at with that, and how are we helping students? Maybe
We're
you
getting,
can.
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Whoever can answer it, tell me you're helping some of our students, and that'll be the greatest thing you said today.
Great. Well, we've met with DOE.
Okay.
So the first batch of students eligible for the program is coming out this fall semester.
Okay.
It's graduation. So the program goes, and we've worked with DOE, simplify the whole process. They will send us a listing of all their graduates by June, and any student that matriculates into UOG or GCC will be given $500 for fees and tuition. And at a later point in the year, and we've come up with November or December, we will send a bill to DOE for the cost of all the students, the $500 per student. Now they're anticipating about 300 students, and that's the level for this year. I believe all of the parties to the First Generation Trust Fund, which is UOG, GCC, and DOE, has put money into the fund, and we're ready to go.
Okay, and UOG has contributed their share, right? As
Yes.
expected, okay. Okay, next question I have in reference to we passed the law on the use of the Pell Grant first before the merit. How is that working out for UOG?
We will start this fall. So
Okay.
the law that you authored will come in effect this fall semester. So every merit student will have to do the FAFSA, which is the federal form to get financial aid.
Right.
If they are qualified for the Pell Grant, we take the Pell Grant first, and any remaining balance will be paid for by the fund. As we testified in the bill, we're looking at a savings of about $500,000 to the program every year. And the Merit Scholarship is actually one of our costliest programs. We've spent about $2.3 million a year on that program. We have every year we have about 56 to 60 students from the high schools to take advantage of the program. Full scholarship at the university, including a monthly stipend and a book stipend.
Okay, now, when you reference the Pell Grant, how many students at the University of Guam are qualified or have even been approached to qualify or to be considered?
At the university, about 80%, 75 to 80% are Pell eligible.
They're eligible?
Yes.
Are they in the system? Yeah, you know, I could be eligible, but am I
Yeah, when we
receiving the money for it?
when we refer to Pell eligible, they're actually receiving Pell.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I've got a list of questions for you folks, but, you know, I'm just going to try to keep it simple. With the priority of pro-tech funds allotted to medical professions, right? That's your top of your list. How many medical students are currently funded, and how many actually return to Guam to serve it, pay back to the program?
I don't have the exact number, but I can get that for you. I believe right now we have 3 students
Only 3?
who are about to finish the program. We have 2 in residency, 1 in Honolulu. The other one escapes my recollection. But
Okay,
over the
just-
years, we've had a pretty good amount of people funded by the program.
But have they returned? Do you have a report to show
Yes,
that
and
when
I
they go,
can
they come
provide
back and they serve?
Right.
Okay.
We can do that. And the ones that don't return, we do have aggressive collections
Okay,
programs on
I've
them.
got a question in reference to collections. I'm not that far away. Just trying to keep the question simple. Based on the Guam Code annotated 17, UGs required to submit their financial statements on the UG Land Grant Research and Extension Special Funds. Are you guys up to date? Could be. Not sure, Randy? Turn on the mic. It's,
I'm sorry, what section was that?
that's on the Guam Code. That's in reference
Just
to
in
your
order-
financial statement, the UG's, on reference to UG's Land Grant Research and Extension Special Fund.
Well, we,
Just-
yeah, our
Dub-
financial
dub-
statement comes to the to the legislature every year, and that includes a lot of that. But I'll take a look at that and make sure that
Just
everything
go down the
everything is
list and
included.
just double check, make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, and so that when my colleagues ask the questions, it's already answered, okay? Okay, you have UOGs requesting for 40 new position, total 40, 30 of them is current, their current vacant position. Okay, what's the potential of filling it? I mean, in 2016, you had 30 and you never filled it, so what's the likelihood? I just don't want you to ask for money for something, you're not gonna fill it, because we're ready to chop that in half and say you've only filled 5, so you don't need $2 million. I can understand the engineering area, because you're after that. There's certain areas that we would have no problem on finding and helping you find the funds, but if you're asking for 40, 30 you didn't fill since 2016, it's sad. And
Yep.
do you have any positions you're filled today out of that 40 that you're asking for? Because I know 30 was on the books.
Yeah, so, I mean, the problem has been every year when we're trying to figure out, we get this amount of money, what can we use it for? And one of the first things we usually do is we say, we have to freeze hiring or freeze hiring for 6 months to buy us a little time. So these have all been cost limited, revenue limited positions that we haven't been able to do what we've tried to do. So we put the positions in our budget, but then when we don't get the full appropriation and then we don't get the full allotment, then we're unable to fill those. So it's not something voluntarily that we're not filling.
Okay, but you do have some positions that you've just filled recently.
We
Out of
when
the 30.
If a critical vacancy opens up and we can't live without it, we fill it.
Okay. Thank you for saying that. Okay, because I was hoping you were going to say you're not getting the money, that's why you're not filling it. Okay, that's what I was waiting to hear. What is your retention rates for all the schools, all the courses at UG? And what efforts is in terms of keeping students until graduation? The reason why I ask that is because for everybody that's here, I don't think anybody was at the university in 1975 when I started, And I stayed at UG until 1990. So, hello, retention rate is good on me. Now, I'm curious about everybody else at the University of Guam. What is the rate? And are they coming back? Are you keeping them there at least for the 4 years, or not at least like me, 15 years to graduate?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The four-year degree is the six-year degree.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not just here at the University of Guam, but also nationwide. And so we tracked our fall-to-fall data on retention rates 6 years out. The latest figure we have in terms of degree completion at the end of 6 years is roughly about 36%. And so what we did in terms of just monitoring specifically our first year freshmen, those who complete their first year after a fall of previous year. And so that's the number that basically was supposed to be the predictor of whether or not we were going to see increase in completion rates. And so we've seen roughly close to about 70%. But the numbers that were most troubling for us, based on our investigation, were the transfer to the after the end of their sophomore year. And so we noticed there was a significant drop, and what we did was intentional effort and employed what we call high-impact practices. A lot more hands-on with the faculty, with the counselors, working in terms of monitoring students who are stopping out. At the university level, we don't call them dropping out, but rather stopping out. And to not just to monitor that, but also arrive at different ways in which we provide students the type of assistance they need, whether it be writing, composition, or math. So we've had math tutors in place. We have the Writing Center under the Division of English and Applied Linguistics. And we also have what we call our student advisement coordinators, to which we have not been able to fully fund for every single college and school, but the research has shown that having more targeted efforts, particularly with our student advisement coordinators, would help to improve upon overall retention and completion. So we continue to track that. We have an institutional researcher who is also our Assistant Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness, Dee Leon Guerrero, and her team. She's behind me. That's an area that's most critical to us. Financial affordability, based on a survey that we had done because we were concerned about students matriculating beyond the fall semester of 2017. We noticed in January of 2018, there was a huge step-out rate. So we actually surveyed those students, and one of the main reasons we found was financial struggles. And so given that, we basically employed the services of the financial aid office. We took a look at collections, bursars, the admissions office, find out what the problems were, and actually did employ what we call triage in working with these particular students. But we also took a look at the portfolio of scholarships, and we've created a last mile scholarship fund, which is intended to support those type of students who are just within perhaps $1,500 to $2,000 short of being able to transition to the following semester. And so a new fund was just approved by the Board of Regents, and we've had the rules and regulations already set up to allow us to be a little more strategic in assisting these undergraduate students, but also we recognize there are graduate students who fall in that category.
Okay, thank you. Senator Castro, you wanted to follow up on what we're discussing?
Sure, I just wanted to note it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe that's another point of discussion are the persistence rates, and we could talk with your IR, because those things the data will have implications for the K through 12 industries. It help us discern the quality of the students coming in, because as you could see, it could affect persistence levels. So that would be one. And then also I understand, talking about retention, you can't seem to push this gentleman away. Mr. Mark Mendiola, I understand, is back with you. That's good. That's actually a benefit. Hopefully he brings additional perspective to the table from from the GITA perspective and from the executive branch. And if he's still the chairman of the board at the Department of Education, that'll be an instrumental lever to use in discussing persistence levels and preparing our young ones coming out of public schools.
I guess that must be a push for Mark Mendola.
He's already there, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I'll look at the staffing pattern. and we'll look at that. Okay. Going back to the federal assistance, just a short one. Are you working with every student that apply at the University of Guam to try to get them to apply for federal assistance? I mean, kind of like line them up? Because, you have to admit that some of the students are going to say, I don't need assistance. My mom and dad's got this. But in reality, they may already qualify. And it's kind of like if you don't help them get the assistance, it'll save the mom and dad that I'll get you the car, I'll cover your books, I'll cover something else, but at least majority of it is paid for by federal assistance. What is the program up there with the University of Guam?
Yes, so we in every orientation, we make it a point to let students know that they file a FAFSA. Now, the FAFSA is free application. We tell them that don't rely on your friends or say just because they think that they may not qualify to not do the application. We've worked with Federal Student Aid, which is the agency at U.S. Department of Education, to help simplify the FAFSA, at least for those students in the region. One of our issues is that when you're doing the FAFSA, we are at a disadvantage because students whose parents file taxes in the continental United States can use a mechanism called the data retrieval tool, which connects directly to the IRS. Unfortunately, we can't connect to Barrigada or Revenue Tax. The whole FAFSA is probably going to explode if we try to connect. So what we're asking them is simplify a way for us to ensure that when a student does the FAFSA for Guam, that it's a simplified version, doing their taxes, they can fill out the form and come up with the results much faster than before. So they've done things like an online application they can do on the phone, which is a lot easier than the paper form. They've actually given us a lot more leeway when it comes to deadlines in doing the FAFSA application. So now our part is letting the students know and encouraging them to fill out the FAFSA. At this point, it's not mandatory when we can't make it mandatory as per federal law, but we can lead them into filling out the FAFSA.
Okay, the reason why I ask this is because if you're not aware, at DOE level, and there's nothing against DOE, but when I was on the board, more than 60% of the student population is under the federal assistance, okay? And if that is true, and still true today, there's no reason why the universities that get students from DOE can't assist them. I mean, I can come to you and says, doesn't cost you a penny, but I think there needs to be sometimes a little bit more effort, and I'm only going to recommend that. It's on you. Do what you need to do, but when you start saying you need money and there's a federal grant out there saying, I'm here, apply, and you don't look at the Guam legislature, because I'll look at Dr. Christ and says, how much effort have you had? What is your percentage on federal assistance on the total students? 25, 35%, you said?
No, closer to 85%.
30 to 85.
And that's about
great if it was 100%.
$7 million.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. I just wanted to ask that question, okay? My next question is UOG 2017 audit. That's the most recent audit, right? They got 5 questions they asked. Strengthen procedures in obtaining required documents, monitor accounts for delinquency, and consider writing off long outstanding notes. I'm just going to read off the 5, and I hope that I know you guys are working on it already. Periodically assess non-movable and inactive accounts. Timely coordinate construction in progress capitalization. maintain vendor selection documentation, strengthen monitoring of dorm collection. Your report is going to be due soon, right? To respond to the OPA audit?
Those are last year, so we've responded to those.
You ready?
The
Can you make sure we get a copy then?
Oh,
We just
okay.
wanted to see it and see
Okay.
how we can
Okay.
help you if there's any areas, we need to assist you. Okay? School of Engineering expected, I think you brought that up, in 2020, February 2020. Will you be able to meet the deadline? 2020? Is everything looking good? I see it, you're asking for 2 vacancies you want to get filled.
So if
So
the
that will
plans
help
are
you.
carry out, I mean, the plans are there, so it's a matter of resourcing the plan, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, what contribution has the university have done for tourism? Let me start with that, because you don't get any TAF money. So I'd like to know what role is UOG doing to help the tourism industry? And I hope you say you play a major role, okay? GCC plays a major role, and I want to see UOG play a role. So please tell me you do.
Yes, we do. Many of our graduates feed into the tourism industry, both directly and indirectly. We do have the International Tourism and Hospitality Management program within the Bachelor of Business Administration degree under the School of Business and Public Administration that has been around for many, many, many years. Once upon a time, that particular program received funds directly from the Tourism Awareness Fund, or Attraction Fund, rather. And it was a healthy amount, I think anywhere between $200,000 and $400,000 a year. So that was discontinued, I believe, over 15 years ago. What we do contribute, we contribute accountants, we contribute folks in finance and economics, tourism, management, and so forth. But we also have a wonderful edu-tourism market. We receive over 7,000 students per year, and they represent both university and high school students across different parts of South Korea, Japan, Okinawa. I'm not sure if we've seen any come from China yet. We're looking at developing Taiwan. But this is our national award-winning English Adventure program that is run through our professional and international programs. And so these are short-term, either a couple of days, a week, or 2 weeks, and that's where we sometimes need our dorm rooms to accommodate these short-term stays. But that has yielded a tremendous amount of net income as a fundraising initiative, and so we hope to grow that even more. And so with that, we also have other types of efforts through research, through our Center for Island Sustainability, their outreach, extension and outreach out of the College of Natural and Applied Sciences, things that are done to address chlorobleaching from our UOG Marine Laboratory, leveraging our students as research assistants to study and ensure that our marine resources are protected. And certainly we look for ways to address the protection of our sea turtles that contribute to the overall attraction of our tourism industry, Mr. Chairman. And then, of course, other ways in which the others, such as the uniqueness of our programs at the university, the Micronesian Area Research Center, and our archaeology program, the efforts of UOG Press, and how it contributes also to providing historical and certainly cultural and heritage-related types of information, whether they be through scholarly types of publications or children's books. And so we're very proud of the many ways in which the different parts of the institution has been able to support our primary industry.
Thank you. I was really hoping you would lay it all out, because I was looking at the budget. I'm trying to see where Tourist Attraction Funds is helping you. And I don't think there's a penny. And we're going to look at that very carefully. Because if everybody's short of money, and I honestly believe charity begins at home, if we want to protect the tourism coming, we need to invest on Guam, not just spend out off island all the time. Senator Kelly, you had a follow-up question?
Suismasi, Chair. And I would just focus on the latter of your term of it being investing rather than charity, to have the TAF tie back into supporting the industry. So just so that I'm understanding this chart on the increasing costs of UOG, I believe at the previous hearing that we had, you had provided a percentage. So if you could just remind me of what the typical government support versus student support is through tuition, what that ratio typically is in a state or an entity, another territory?
Yeah, I think typically we've been pretty much where everyone else has been. Our history has been about 50-50. And actually in the States, it's even been greater than that. But now there's been a big shift in the States, so they're getting much less from their governments these days. So we're actually, if we compare what we get from our government with what most other universities in the States do, we fare well. But yeah, we'd still like to avoid, so a lot of other universities have been very aggressive with their tuition increases. I've heard of people going 50-60% in dealing with the lack of funds they get from the local government. We're trying to avoid that.
And we're also the only university in Guam and in the region. So public universities in states with neighbors can depend on both privates in the state, and they can depend on the production of neighboring universities. So we're in a unique situation where we're the only thing in the area. So we need to provide all of the graduates.
I was also thinking as the discussion was going on, can you let me know, with the recruitment efforts and the outreach to our local youth, it was a really important factor for myself when my son was going to university to look at, a variety of reasons that it made sense for him to attend school here, at least for the first few years. He ended up graduating here. And then going to graduate school after that off island. But with the local recruitment, do you emphasize that cost-saving measure of going to school here for the first 1 to 3 years, and then if they have a specialized degree, education or family tradition that they're looking to fulfill, that last year or two can be at the stateside university? It doesn't have to be all 4. Another really important factor for me was I have heard a lot of stories of people not finishing college in the States because it's too much to adjust to entirely. They're adjusting culturally, they're adjusting from being away from home, they're adjusting from being away from family, amongst all these other things. And so that was something I promoted when I was teaching high school to my students, that if they go for the first year or two, even if they had dreams or reasons why they were going to be going off island, to really consider going those first year or two here so that they could adjust and have those adjustments in place before they attain the latter part of their degree. So I'm just wondering if that's part of the message that you're sending out, or if we could increase that.
Thank you, Senator. That is part of the messaging that we certainly have been very, very aggressive in positioning. We do share with the students a chart that shows, the affordability factor, how that compares to attending school off island, including the travel that's involved when the students get mahalang, and they want to come home for the summertime or during the winter breaks and the impacts. I recall presenting in front of a group of high school students. There were probably almost 300. And so I asked the question, how many of you want to go to an off-island university after graduation? And it looked like over 90% raised their hands. And so the second question I posed was, how many of you know where the money is going to come from to help pay for this off-island education? And only 3 students raised their hands. And so I pitched the notion of the value of attending your homeland university and the experiences that they hope to gain by going off-island is being able to have that off-island experience. The message is, come to the University of Guam and you can study off-island. And we speak to the many student exchange opportunities, the travel opportunities, travel award opportunities for presenting at conferences, competing in competitions, and we give them many examples of our students, present and past, who have taken advantage of those. And certainly we say, well, some of you may just want to eventually transfer, but give your University of Guam an opportunity. But certainly speaking to all the wonderful student experiences, we have students sitting behind me here in this room, but we also use our existing students to come as part of that roadshow to speak to those many types of opportunities available to them should they choose to come to the University of Guam.
I just want to mention also, and I'm sure you're very aware of this, but one of the opportunities that I've really seen as a graduating student who served as a research assistant and TA for many years, and my son did as well, that there's that increased ability to do so at the university because of the size of the school. And I think that was really a key factor in him being able, my son, being able to be picked up as a teacher's assistant at his graduate school, because I was sweating about his off-island tuition, and it became a way for us to be able to afford their graduate school. So yes, there are many benefits to going here that can be helping them later on down the road.
And could I just add that we're also working on educating parents. Quite a large percentage of our students are first in their families to go to college, so the whole how to finance higher education is a big new thing. So we have an effort from enrollment management and student success to educate parents as well on all of these issues. So,
I have one, actually, a very curious question. Is there a program where the University of Guam gets with the Department of Education and kind of like test out all their seniors to make sure they can qualify to get in UOG? First round? First time test? I think some of you probably don't know where I'm going. Because about when I was on the Board of Education, we were determined that 60% of the students that test at university can't even walk in to a regular class. They have to go to the beginner's class. So I'm just curious, is there a program set up with the University of Guam and DOE to make sure the students, when they go and apply for University of Guam, they can walk right into the right class they should be able to walk into?
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
maybe so.
yeah.
You were on the board with me then when we did that.
We were on the board together. Thank you, sir, for that question. Our math and our English faculty are working very closely with key members of the GDOE system to ensure that we go deeper than just hitting students at the senior level, but also ensure that the curricula for both areas are worked in concert with our folks from the School of Education, our College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, and also with our College of Natural and Applied Sciences. Recently, we have our dean, Dr. Alicia Uggan. Her folks held a focus group sessions I think over the weekend with teachers from GDOE. So we're looking for more fruitful outcomes and further development of a lot more successes coming out of our K-12 system with that partnership.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Kreis.
And could I just point out that we have a couple of students here in the audience. They have to go to class soon, but if you wanted to ask them any questions, now's the time.
Not unless they wanted to testify. Otherwise, I was going to wrap it up. I think we've had a very educational and very fruitful roundtable. And if there's any questions that any of my colleagues have, I'd just ask them and welcome them to ask the university. If we have anything, we'll just go directly to you, Dr. Kreis. And other than that, there being none, the committee will conclude this roundtable discussion. And if anybody would like to submit any testimony, submit it to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. @gmail.com. Sidus Marcy for your attendance, participate in today's roundtable, and for those at home, thank you for watching. It is now 10:40, and you all have a nice day. Thank you.
To its Masi.